Mary Magdalene, an icon of mystery and complexity.
Mary Magdalene, a figure shrouded in mystery and controversy, was one of the most important women in the history of Christianity. For centuries, her life, role, and image have been the subject of numerous interpretations, ranging from portrayals of her as a penitent sinner to a strong spiritual leader. In this article, we will explore the complex narrative of Mary Magdalene, her presence in biblical and apocryphal texts, and the influence she has had on art, literature, and popular culture.
The beginnings of Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene, also known as Mary of Magdala, was a 1st century Jewish woman from a thriving fishing village by the Sea of Galilee. Her name appears in the canonical Gospels more times than many apostles, highlighting her significance in early Christianity. According to the account of the evangelist Luke, Mary was healed of 7 demons, suggesting that she may have struggled with severe health or spiritual issues. This dramatic transformation marked the beginning of her devotion to Jesus and was a pivotal moment in her life.
The beginnings of Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene, also known as Mary of Magdala, is one of the most fascinating figures in the history of religion. Her beginnings are shrouded in mystery, and her story reveals an extraordinary journey from confusion to spiritual enlightenment. In this chapter, we will examine the biography of Mary Magdalene, her social context, and the significance she held in early Christianity.
Origin and historical context.
Mary Magdalene came from Magdala, a small fishing village located by the Sea of Galilee. In the 1st century, this region witnessed many social and religious upheavals. Tensions existed between the Roman occupiers and the Jews, which affected the daily lives of the inhabitants. In this context, Mary Magdalene was a Jewess, which was significant for her identity. In a male-dominated society, women were often marginalized. However, Mary stood out as one of the few women whose name appears in the Gospels.
Early life and background.
Biblical accounts indicate that Mary Magdalene was a woman who experienced serious difficulties. According to the Gospel of Luke, Luke 8 verse 2, Jesus healed her of 7 demons, suggesting that she may have struggled with severe health or spiritual issues. This healing was a turning point in her life, prompting her to follow Jesus and join his group of disciples.
Disciple of Jesus.
After her healing, Mary Magdalene became a devoted disciple of Jesus. Unlike many other women of her time, who were confined to domestic roles, Mary actively participated in Jesus' public life. She accompanied him on his journeys and provided him with material support, making her one of the key figures in his mission. Her presence at crucial moments in Jesus' life, such as the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection, underscores her significance as a witness and participant in the events that shaped Christianity.
Role in the resurrection.
Mary Magdalene is particularly known as the first person to see the resurrected Jesus. In the canonical Gospels, including the Gospel of Mark, Mark 16 verse 9, and the Gospel of John, John 20 verses 14 to 18, her role is crucial. Jesus entrusts her with the task of announcing to the disciples that he has risen from the dead. This not only emphasizes her importance but also indicates that women had a significant role in early Christianity. The beginnings of Mary Magdalene are rooted in the complex social and religious context of the 1st century. Her story, from healing to becoming one of Jesus' most important disciples, shows that she was not only a historical figure but also a symbol of transformation, strength, and devotion. As her image has evolved over the centuries, she remains a key figure in studies of early Christianity and in the spiritual searches of contemporary individuals.
Mary's presence in the Gospels.
Mary Magdalene is one of the most recognizable figures in the New Testament, and her presence in the Gospels is crucial for understanding her role in the history of Christianity. In this chapter, we will examine her portrayal in the canonical Gospels, as well as the significance she held in the context of Jesus' life and teachings.
Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of Mark.
The Gospel of Mark, considered the oldest of the canonical Gospels, introduces Mary Magdalene in the context of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. In chapter 15, Mary Magdalene is mentioned as one of the women who witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus. Along with other women, she observes Jesus dying on the cross, Mark 15 verse 40. After his death, Mary and the other women go to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body, Mark 16 verse 1. The most significant moment in the Gospel of Mark is that Mary Magdalene is the first person to discover the empty tomb and encounters an angel who announces Jesus' resurrection to her, Mark 16 verses 5 to 7. The angel tells her to go and inform the disciples that Jesus has risen from the dead. This grants Mary a unique place in the history of Christianity as the first witness of the resurrection.
Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of Matthew.
The Gospel of Matthew also emphasizes the role of Mary Magdalene in the resurrection narrative. In Matthew 27 verse 56, Mary is mentioned among the women present at the cross, and in Matthew 28 verses 1 to 10, she, along with another Mary, comes to the tomb. After discovering the empty tomb, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary meet the resurrected Jesus, who tells them to go and announce this to the disciples. Matthew highlights the personal relationship between Jesus and Mary, making her a key figure in this narrative.
Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of Luke.
The Gospel of Luke provides a slightly different image of Mary Magdalene. In Luke 8 verses 1 to 3, she is described as one of the women who were healed by Jesus of demons and who accompanied him on his journeys. This passage emphasizes her role as an active disciple who supports Jesus not only spiritually but also materially. As in the other Gospels, Mary Magdalene is present during the crucifixion and is one of the first to discover the empty tomb, Luke 24 verses 1 to 10. In Luke, when she encounters the angels at the tomb, their message to her is the same as in the other Gospels: Jesus has risen from the dead and is to appear to the disciples.
Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of John.
The Gospel of John presents Mary Magdalene in a particularly personal way. In John 20 verses 1 to 18, she, rather than other women, is the main character who discovers the empty tomb. In this version of the text, when Mary weeps at the tomb, she encounters the resurrected Jesus, who calls her by name. This personal meeting and dialogue between them are extremely significant, as they reveal the deep connection she had with him. Jesus tells her not to touch him, because he has not yet ascended to the Father, which suggests that her role as the primary witness of the resurrection is exceptional.
The significance of Mary Magdalene's presence in the Gospels.
The presence of Mary Magdalene in the Gospels has profound theological and social significance. As the first witness of the resurrection, her role highlights that women had a significant contribution to early Christianity, which is particularly relevant in the patriarchal context of the first century. The fact that she was the first person to see the resurrected Jesus serves as a strong argument for gender equality in the spiritual context. Mary Magdalene is a figure who has been interpreted in various ways over the centuries. However, her presence in the Gospels remains crucial for understanding early Christianity. Her role as a witness to the resurrection, a devoted disciple, and a spiritual guide makes her a symbol not only of hope but also of the strength of women in religion. As more people explore her character, they discover that the story of Mary Magdalene is not just a tale of sin and redemption but also one of spiritual power and independence. Mary Magdalene is one of the few women who play a key role in the Gospels. In the Gospels of Mark and Luke, her name appears in the context of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. She was present during key events such as the Last Supper, the crucifixion, and the burial of Jesus. Moreover, according to all four Gospels, Mary was the first person to see the resurrected Jesus, which grants her a unique place in the history of Christianity.
Reinterpretation of early texts.
The multi-layered representations of Mary Magdalene in the canonical Gospels and the apocryphal Gnostic texts offer various perspectives on her character. In Gnostic Gospels such as the Gospel of Mary, Mary is portrayed as a leader among the apostles, emphasizing her respected status in some early Christian circles. In these texts, Mary not only follows the teachings of Jesus but also shares them, showcasing her as a source of spiritual wisdom.
Pope Gregory and the change of narrative.
In the 6th century, Pope Gregory I associated the figure of Mary Magdalene with other biblical women, which led to her erroneous depiction as a sinner. This interpretation persisted for centuries, influencing the way women were perceived in the Church. Instead of being recognized as a strong figure, Mary became a symbol of penance. Gregory, in his sermons, identified Mary with the unnamed sinner who anointed Jesus' feet, leading to her mistaken identification with other women in the New Testament, such as Mary of Bethany.
Pope Gregory and the change of narrative about Mary Magdalene.
Pope Gregory I, also known as Gregory the Great, had a significant impact on the interpretation of Mary Magdalene's character in the history of Christianity. His sermons and teachings contributed to shaping the image of Mary as a penitent sinner, which had long-term consequences for the perception of women in the Church and society. In this chapter, we will examine how Gregory changed the narrative about Mary Magdalene and what the effects of this change were.
Gregory the Great and his sermons.
Pope Gregory I served as Pope from 590 to 604 CE, and his sermons were an essential tool in shaping church doctrine. In one of his most well-known sermons, he combined the figure of Mary Magdalene with other biblical women, leading to her identification with Mary of Bethany and the unnamed sinner who anointed Jesus' feet. This association, based on imprecise interpretations of biblical texts, had far-reaching consequences for Mary's image.
Identification of Mary Magdalene as a sinner.
Gregory I described Mary as a sinner who repents for her transgressions. His teachings emphasized that Mary was someone who experienced redemption through the love and grace of Jesus. This connection to the idea of penance meant that for centuries, Mary Magdalene was perceived as a symbol of sinfulness and redemption, influencing how women were viewed in a spiritual context.
Consequences of the change of narrative.
The change in the narrative about Mary Magdalene had significant consequences both in theology and in society. Identifying her with a sinner led to a distortion of her true image. Instead of being seen as a strong and independent disciple of Jesus, Mary became a symbol of penance, which affected the perception of women in the Church. As a result, women began to be viewed primarily through the lens of sin and the need for repentance, limiting their roles in religious communities.
Impact on art and literature.
The The narrative created by Gregory the Great also influenced art and literature. In the Middle Ages, Mary Magdalene was often depicted in the context of penance, emphasizing her sinfulness. Artists such as Donatello and Caravaggio portrayed her in dramatic situations, often focusing on her emotions related to repentance. Such representations reinforced the image of Mary as a sinner in society, affecting the interpretation of her character for centuries.
Reinterpretations in later times.
As research into history and theology evolved, Mary Magdalene began to reclaim her true place in the Christian narrative. In the 20th century, within the context of feminist theology, traditional interpretations of her character started to be questioned. Contemporary scholars strive to separate Mary as a historical figure from the image created by Gregory and other theologians.
Conclusions.
Pope Gregory I played a key role in shaping the narrative about Mary Magdalene, which had long-lasting consequences for her image in the church and society. Identifying her with a sinner limited her role as a strong disciple of Jesus, affecting the perception of women in a religious context. Today's studies of Mary Magdalene and her role in the history of Christianity open new perspectives that could help restore her rightful place in the narrative about Jesus in the early church.
Mary as image in art.
The image of Mary Magdalene has evolved in art from the Middle Ages to the present day. In Donatello's sculpture, she is depicted in a state of sadness and repentance, illustrating the moral transformation that was particularly significant during times of religious turmoil. Conversely, paintings by Titian portray her as a figure of majesty, reflecting the glorious Renaissance interpretation of biblical figures. In literature, her character also inspires reflections on the role of women in society, becoming an archetype of transformation.
Controversial theories about her relationship with Jesus.
Over the centuries, theories have emerged suggesting that Mary Magdalene may have been not only a disciple of Jesus but also his partner. The most famous proponent of such theories is Dan Brown, author of the Da Vinci Code, who suggests that Jesus and Mary had children together. These controversial theories gained popularity but lack solid historical foundations. In the non-canonical Gospel of Philip, Mary is described as a close companion of Jesus, which also raises speculation about their relationship. Some scholars point out that the closeness of Mary and Jesus in these texts may suggest something more than mere friendship.
Controversial theories about the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus.
Mary Magdalene is a figure who has aroused controversy and speculation regarding her relationship with Jesus for centuries. As research into early Christianity and apocryphal texts has developed, various theories have emerged suggesting that their relationship may have been more intimate than traditionally believed. In this chapter, we will examine some of these theories, their sources, and the influence they have had on contemporary perceptions of Mary Magdalene in Jesus.
Early sources and context.
The first mentions of the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene appear in Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Philip, discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945. In this text, Mary is described as Jesus' companion, which some interpret as a sign of marriage. Additionally, the text suggests that Jesus often kissed her on the mouth, which also raises speculation about their intimacy. However, these interpretations are controversial and often subject to debate among scholars.
The Da Vinci Code theory.
One of the most well-known theories regarding the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is presented in Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code. The author suggests that Jesus and Mary were not only partners but also had children, and their lineage survived through the ages. This theory gained immense popularity and became the subject of numerous discussions, despite not being based on solid historical evidence. Brown bases his narrative on distorted interpretations of history and symbolism in art, claiming that many well-known works contain hidden messages regarding this relationship. The use of fictional elements in a literary work has sparked considerable controversy, especially among historians and theologians who emphasize the lack of evidence to support his theories.
The Gospel of Mary and Gnosticism.
The Gospel of Mary, discovered in the early 20th century, provides an alternative view of Mary's relationship with Jesus. In this text, Mary is not only a disciple but also a teacher, suggesting that she had a unique understanding of Jesus' spiritual teachings. Gnosticism, from which this text derives, emphasized personal spiritual knowledge, which may suggest a deeper connection between Mary and Jesus than that presented in the canonical Gospels.
Interpretations in a feminist context.
Contemporary feminist studies have also addressed the topic of the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Some feminist theologians suggest that Mary may have played an equal role alongside Jesus, challenging traditional patriarchal interpretations. This perspective emphasizes that Mary Magdalene could be not only a disciple but also a person who had a significant impact on Jesus' teachings and early Christianity.
Doubts and criticism of theories.
Despite the popularity of controversial theories about the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, many scholars are skeptical of these interpretations. Karen L. King, a professor at Harvard Divinity School, noted that there is no historical evidence that Jesus was married, and many of these theories are based on speculation and interpretations that may reflect contemporary anxieties and desires rather than actual historical facts. Controversial theories about the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus reflect the complexity of both their characters and the cultural contexts in which they are interpreted. As research on early Christianity continues to evolve and feminist interpretations gain significance, Mary Magdalene becomes a symbol not only of spiritual power but also of equality in religion. While many theories remain controversial and speculative, their analysis can lead to a deeper understanding of the role of women in the history of religion and their influence on the development of Christianity.
The Gospel of Mary and Gnosticism.
The Gospel of Mary, discovered in the 19th century, provides a fascinating portrait of Mary as a spiritual leader. In this Gnostic text, Mary communicates teachings she received from Jesus, emphasizing her role as a bearer of profound spiritual knowledge. Gnosticism, as a branch of early Christianity, emphasized personal spiritual knowledge, contrasting with the orthodox teachings of the Church. In the Gospel of Mary, her character is not only a disciple but also a teacher, showcasing her influence on early Christian teachings.
Gnosticism and its context.
Gnosticism is a complex religious and philosophical movement that developed in the first centuries of our era, parallel to early Christianity. It is characterized by a variety of teachings and practices that emphasized personal, spiritual knowledge, gnosis, as a path to salvation. In this chapter, we will examine the main features of Gnosticism, its historical context, and its influence on early Christianity.
Definition of Gnosticism.
Gnosticism is not a uniform religion but rather a collection of diverse traditions and beliefs that share common characteristics. A key element of Gnosticism is the concept of gnosis, or secret knowledge, which leads to spiritual enlightenment. Gnostics believed that salvation could be achieved through understanding the true nature of reality and one's own identity. Gnosticism often contrasted with Orthodox Christianity, which was based on the authority of the scriptures and the teachings of the Church. Gnostics challenged traditional teachings, proposing alternative interpretations of biblical texts and creating their own mythologies.
Historical context.
Gnosticism developed during a time when Judaism and early Christianity were in a phase of intense formation. The Romans dominated Judea, leading to social and religious tensions. In this context, many religious groups sought answers to fundamental questions about existence, suffering, and transcendence. Gnosticism was also a response to the cultural and philosophical influences of Hellenism that dominated the region. During this time, various philosophies such as Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Platonism were popular, influencing Gnostic thought. Gnostics often drew from these traditions, creating syncretic belief systems.
Key concepts of Gnosticism. Gnosticism is based on several key concepts.
Dualism ***. Gnostics often believed in dualism, dividing reality into two opposing aspects, the material world, considered evil or false, and the spiritual world, considered good and true. In this context, the material world was seen as a trap from which the soul must escape. Spiritual enlightenment ***, gnosis, or spiritual knowledge, was a crucial element of salvation. Gnostics believed that only through personal experience and knowledge of the truth could one attain salvation. Divinity ***. Gnostics often had complex notions regarding divinity. Many Gnostic traditions posited the existence of a higher God, who was transcendent, and less important demiurges who created the material world. This demiurge was often perceived as a malevolent being.
Gnosticism and early Christianity.
Gnosticism and early Christianity shared many points of contact but also had significant differences. Some Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary, utilize biblical material but interpret it in ways that may seem heretical from an Orthodox perspective. As the Catholic Church gained significance, Gnosticism became increasingly marginalized. By the 4th century, as Orthodox doctrines were being established, Gnosticism became a target of persecution, and many of its texts were destroyed or forgotten. Gnosticism was an important element in the history of religion, influencing the development of early Christianity and shaping spiritual pursuits during that period. Its concepts regarding spiritual enlightenment, dualism, and the role of knowledge are significant not only in a historical context but also in contemporary discussions, inspiring various religious and spiritual movements. Understanding Gnosticism and its context allows for a better grasp of the complexity of early religious traditions and their influence on modern thinking about spirituality and identity.
Popular culture and contemporary reinterpretation.
Since the late 20th century, in connection with feminist theology, Mary Magdalene has gained new value as a symbol of strength and women's independence. Her image in contemporary literature and art often emphasizes her role as an active participant in the history of Christianity. Novels such as Mary Magdalene by Margaret George portray her as a strong and intelligent woman who challenges traditional social norms. Contemporary representations of Mary Magdalene frequently focus on her spiritual power and independence, contrasting with earlier interpretations.
Mary Magdalene and sacred femininity.
In the context of sacred femininity, Mary Magdalene plays an important role in various religious traditions. In Buddhism, she is compared to Tara, while in Hinduism, she is likened to goddesses such as Kali or Lakshmi. Contemporary studies of sacred femininity emphasize her significance as a symbol of balance between the masculine and feminine in spirituality, which becomes a key element in considerations of her role in the history of religion. Many contemporary theologians emphasize the importance of Mary Magdalene as a figure who can inspire spiritual seekers, both women and men.
The influence of Mary Magdalene on religious movements.
Mary Magdalene has also become an inspiration for various religious movements seeking balance between masculinity and femininity. These movements often draw from Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, to highlight the importance of women in spirituality. In the context of modern spiritual studies, Mary Magdalene is frequently portrayed as a symbol of liberation and empathy, attracting the attention of many contemporary spiritual seekers.
The influence of Mary Magdalene on religious movements.
Mary Magdalene is a figure who has influenced various religious movements for centuries, often serving as a symbol of spiritual power and equality. Her story and image are being reinterpreted in the context of contemporary spiritual searches, making her a key figure in discussions about the role of women in religion. In this chapter, we will examine how Mary Magdalene has influenced different religious movements and what significance she holds in the context of sacred femininity.
Feministki movements and sacred femininity.
In the 20th century, within the context of feminist movements, Mary Magdalene gained new value as a symbol of sacred femininity. Feminist theologians, such as Mary Daly and Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, began to challenge traditional patriarchal interpretations of biblical figures, including Mary Magdalene. Their works emphasized that Mary was not only a penitent sinner but also a strong and independent woman who played a crucial role in early Christianity. In this perspective, Mary Magdalene becomes a symbol of liberation, and her story inspires women to fight for their place in religious communities. These movements often reference Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, to demonstrate that women had a significant influence on the teachings of Jesus and early Christianity.
Esoteric movements and Gnosticism.
Mary Magdalene is frequently invoked in the context of esoteric movements that draw inspiration from Gnosticism. In these traditions, Mary is seen as a bearer of secret knowledge, and her relationship with Jesus is treated as a symbol of deep spiritual connection. These movements often challenge the orthodox teachings of the Church, proposing alternative approaches to spirituality. In many Gnostic texts, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as a key figure who has access to knowledge that has been ignored or eliminated by the traditional Church. In this way, her character becomes a symbol of the search for truth and spiritual enlightenment, as well as a challenge to patriarchal structures in religion.
Contemporary spiritual movements.
In recent decades, Mary Magdalene has become an inspiration for various contemporary spiritual movements that seek balance between masculinity and femininity. Many of these movements emphasize the integration of women's experiences in spirituality, with Mary often depicted as a symbol of this transformation. These movements frequently highlight her role as a teacher and spiritual leader, contrasting with the traditional image of a sinner. These interpretations point to the need to recognize and celebrate feminine spirituality, aiming to restore balance in religious practices.
Mary Magdalene in the context of religious movements.
In the context of various religious movements, Mary Magdalene can be seen as a symbol of a shared spiritual journey. Her story illustrates that everyone, regardless of their past, has the opportunity for redemption and spiritual growth. Contemporary interpretations of her character can inspire people to seek their own spiritual path, independent of conventions and traditions. The influence of Mary Magdalene on religious movements is complex and multifaceted. Her character inspires diverse interpretations that emphasize the significance of women in spirituality and their role in the history of religion. As a symbol of sacred femininity, Mary Magdalene becomes an inspiration for contemporary spiritual seekers striving for balance and integration. As research on her character and history develops, Mary Magdalene may become a central point in discussions about gender equality and the place of women in religious traditions, demonstrating that her influence on religious movements is both historical and contemporary.
Sacred feminism.
In the context of sacred feminism, Mary Magdalene plays a key role. Movements that arose in response to patriarchal structures in religion seek to restore women to spiritual traditions. Mary Magdalene, as a figure who was close to Jesus and had a crucial role in his teachings, becomes a symbol of this movement. Her story is often used to emphasize that women have the right to occupy leadership roles in religious communities.
Mary Magdalene in literature and art.
In literature, Mary Magdalene has often been depicted as a tragic figure struggling with her past. In the novel Mary Magdalene by Margaret George, this character comes alive as a strong woman who makes decisions that shape her fate. In painting, artists such as Titian and Caravaggio portrayed her as an emotionally rich figure, highlighting her complexity and depth. Titian's painting depicts her as a woman in a majestic cloak holding a jar of ointment, symbolizing the anointing of Jesus' feet.
Reflections on contemporary perceptions of Mary Magdalene.
Contemporary studies and interpretations of Mary Magdalene prompt us to reflect on how we perceive women in religion and society. Changing narratives that emphasize her strength, independence, and wisdom represent an important step toward a more egalitarian approach to spirituality. Mary Magdalene is not only a historical figure but also a symbol that inspires action and spiritual seeking.
The message of Mary Magdalene.
The message of Mary Magdalene remains relevant even today. Her story reminds us that everyone, regardless of their past, has the opportunity for redemption and a new beginning. Many contemporary women find inspiration in her character to fight for their rights and place in society. Mary Magdalene becomes a symbol that reminds us that spirituality is not reserved solely for men. Women also have the right to express their faith and spiritual experiences.
The message of Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene, as one of the most important figures in the history of Christianity, carries a message that is both universal and timeless. Her life, filled with turmoil, transformation, and spiritual redemption, shows that everyone, regardless of their past, has the opportunity to find meaning and understanding in spirituality. In this chapter, we will examine the key aspects of Mary Magdalene's message and their significance in the context of the contemporary world.
Redemption and transformation.
One of the main messages that emerges from the story of Mary Magdalene is the idea of redemption. For centuries, she has been viewed as a sinner who found a path to redemption through the love and mercy of Jesus. Her life illustrates that every mistake, every stumble, can become the foundation for personal transformation. This message is particularly important in today's world, where many individuals struggle with feelings of guilt, shame, or confusion.
The strength of femininity.
Mary Magdalene is also a symbol of strength and independence for women. Her presence during key moments in Jesus' life, especially as the first witness of the resurrection, underscores the importance of women in spirituality and their role in the history of religion. Contemporary interpretations of her character encourage women to discover their own strength, independence, and spiritual power. The message of Mary Magdalene reminds us that women have the right to take on leadership roles in the community and to express their spirituality.
Personal spirituality.
In the context of Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, the message of Mary Magdalene focuses on personal spirituality and inner wisdom. Mary is portrayed as a teacher who possesses profound spiritual knowledge. Her story encourages the pursuit of one's own spiritual path and trusting one's intuitions and inner voice. Contemporary spiritual movements often reference her character to emphasize the value of personal experience in religion.
Forgiveness and love.
Another essential aspect of Mary Magdalene's message is the idea of forgiveness. Her relationship with Jesus demonstrates that love and acceptance can transform a person's life. This message is particularly relevant in the context of contemporary social challenges, where forgiveness and empathy can lead to healing and reconciliation. Mary Magdalene teaches us that true love knows no bounds and can overcome all obstacles.
Equality and community.
Mary Magdalene can also be seen as a symbol of equality in a religious context. Her story highlights the need to recognize the role of women in spirituality and their impact on the development of religious traditions. This message encourages the building of a community where both men and women can collaborate on equal terms, creating a space for diverse voices and experiences. The message of Mary Magdalene is a rich collection of ideas that remain relevant in today's world. Redemption, the strength of femininity, personal spirituality, forgiveness, and equality are values that can inspire people to act and seek meaning in life. Mary Magdalene, as a historical figure and a symbol of spiritual power, reminds us that everyone has the right to a second chance, and that love and acceptance can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Her message is not only an invitation to reflection but also a call to action toward personal and social healing. Mary Magdalene remains one of the most enigmatic and fascinating figures in the history of religion. Her life, filled with mysteries and controversies, provides many topics for reflection. As we explore her image in various contexts, we discover that she is not only a symbol of transformation but also an inspiration for contemporary spiritual seekers. Her story reminds us that each of us has the potential for redemption and that true spirituality knows no bounds. Mary Magdalene is a figure who has traveled a long path from sinner to an icon of strength and wisdom. Her story reveals the complexity of femininity in a religious and social context. As we uncover new interpretations and perspectives on her life, we see how much she can teach us about love, redemption, and spiritual power. It is worth continuing the exploration of her image to uncover the richness that her story carries.